All right, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to BRK 3731, where we're going to talk about how to build a live streaming solution using Azure Media Services. My name is Jason Seuss. I'm part of the Azure Media Services engineering team, and specifically, I'm a product manager that owns our streaming services and our CDN services within the team. So day in and day out, what I'm thinking about is how to enable you to create very powerful streaming solutions as easily as possible. So let me go ahead and dive in, and let me tell you a little bit about really what my goals are for what you will know when you walk out of this room today. So number one, for those of you that are not yet familiar with Azure Media Services, and I'd love to take a really quick poll just for my own information, how many of you are familiar with Azure Media Services? Fantastic. Okay, our message is getting out. So I would say roughly 50%. That's great. So for the rest of you, I'll fill in some gaps about what is Azure Media Services. Next, I want to talk about, since we're talking about building a live streaming solution, I want to talk about the components that go into making up a full end-to-end live streaming solution. So we'll take some time to walk through each one of those, make sure you understand what those are, how you stitch them together. And then I want to actually walk through kind of a simulation of a live streaming event where I'll show you a timeline of kind of a prototypical live streaming scenario. We'll walk through that timeline. I'll execute each one of those steps. I'll have you play back the live stream that I'm going to create on your devices, so hopefully everybody has a device handy that they can use for that. And then I'll finish up with some links to more information. We've got 75 minutes. Lots to cover, and there's a whole lot more information out there that I can point you towards as far as blog entries and all that kind of good stuff to fill in more additional detail. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So again, as I said, let's talk about Azure Media Services. So just to frame this up a little bit, let me just talk about why we are a team of 100 people within the Azure organization, within Microsoft, that is focused on just digital media. Why is Microsoft willing to make that big of an investment in media? Well, I think some of the statistics, and I won't bother reading all the slides for you, but what we're seeing is a revolution happening on the web where video is very much becoming the currency. We kind of started out, websites looked like kind of brochures, text, maybe a little bit of photos, went through a bit of an evolution where we had more imagery. What I would say is video is now the key. People are going to the web more and more to find video, whether it's they want to learn how to do something, they want to watch a video, they want to read 5 pages of text, they want to go watch something on Netflix, whatever it may be. Folks are going out to find video. That's what they're looking for. So we see this as a very, very significant workload for Azure going forward. The one statistic that I'll point out here is that next year it's predicted that 90% of all traffic flowing across the internet will be video traffic. Pretty incredible number. But it gives you an idea of why we as Azure are making such a big investment in enabling you to build video workflows on top of Azure. Just a little bit more about that. I'll skip through this. So with all that being said, what is Azure Media Services and what do we do to help you build these video workflows that I was just talking about? Well, there's basically 5 major components of the platform that we build that you can stitch together to build your workflows. First off, we have upload and ingest capabilities. So whether you have a file-based workflow. You have some sort of mezzanine file, whether it's an MP4 or an MXF file or whatever your original content is coming in as. We have capabilities that you can upload that content into the cloud, do it securely. In the case of live, we have live ingest capabilities, so we can ingest over RTMP, fragmented MP4, etc. So ingest capabilities. The next is that we have encoding and packaging and indexing capabilities. So if you need to then take that mezzanine file and you need to flip it into, say, 7 renditions, 7 different quality levels of MP4s to stream out to your audience, you need to package that into various protocols like HLS or HDS, etc. We have those capabilities as well. And then the last thing mentioned here is indexing. And what that is referring to is a new set of media intelligence capabilities that we're developing. The first one being basically voice-to-text indexing. So you can take a video file that has someone speaking, and we'll translate all of their voice into text that then can be used as closed captions or to use to search the video, etc. The next one is content protection, which is important for lots of folks. If you have sensitive content that you need to protect, whether it be corporate communications that you want to make sure doesn't leak, or you have studio content. There's any number of scenarios where you may need to protect your content. So we have those capabilities as well. I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a few minutes. And then lastly, again, where I live and breathe every day, which is our live and on-demand streaming capabilities and our CDN capabilities. So once you have your content prepared using our platform, how can you stream it out to your audience and reach as many different viewers as possible on whatever type of device they're on, and the protocols that are needed for those devices. And then lastly, and I'll touch on this a little bit here today, we now have a player framework as well that we provide as part of our service. And I won't get into the details here, but it takes care of a lot of the pain of building a cross-platform, cross-device video player to reach as many viewers as possible. All right, so a little different way of saying the exact same thing. This is kind of the architectural layer cake for our platform. So there's a couple of things that I want to get across on this slide. And the first one is that Azure Media Services is it's a higher level platform as a service on top of all of the baseline compute and storage and bandwidth that you get from Azure. So in other words, we are a platform that sits on top of all of this kind of foundational capabilities that are in Azure. So all the hyperscale compute and storage and bandwidth, what we do is we layer on top of that, and we provide you with all the various services that I just talked about, and we provide that to you through a set of REST APIs. Now let me contrast that to try to give you a little better idea of what I'm talking about. So certainly, you could walk up to Azure, you could purchase a VM. In that VM, you could install an encoder. You could use that encoder to do transcoding. Now, for you to do that, first off, you've got to build out that VM image. You've got to deploy it to Azure. If it turns out you have a lot of content and you need to say, do 100 different transcode jobs in parallel, you're going to need to scale out all those VMs and run them in parallel. As that encoder has patches or new versions that become available, you're going to have to basically update your image and redeploy. So there's a lot of plumbing work that you would have to do at that point. We take care of all that. So we provide you with the REST API that you can use to build out your workflows, and we take care of all the plumbing work of provisioning VMs, scaling them, servicing them, all that kind of stuff. So you get to think at a higher level about the workflow that you want to create and just implement that workflow through a REST API. So the applications that you would write would be in this yellow bar up here. So you would write basically a SaaS solution or an application that would then interact with us through our REST APIs to build out your workflows. So here's some of the usage scenarios that we see and that we're building for. The first one being premium VOD. So, for instance, we have a customer named Blinkbox in the UK. They're very much like a Netflix. They use our service to do all of their VOD transcoding, all their file-based transcoding. So as they get content from the studios, they're uploading it to us. They're using us to transcode it, to protect it as well, and then to stream it out to all of their audience. The next one is live events. So a customer reference here is NBC Sports. So NBC Sports uses us for all of their live streaming. So if you tune in to them on the web to watch, say, the Super Bowl, they used us for the Super Bowl this past February, but on a daily basis they're doing things like NHL hockey, Formula One racing, Premier League soccer, etc. All of that live streaming that they're doing is running through our platform as well. Now, when I say live events, what I mean is live streams that have a beginning and end, beginning of the soccer match and end of the soccer match, as opposed to live linear, which runs 24 hours a day. So think of this as being a simulcast of the broadcast channels that you see on your TV. So that's another scenario where folks are using our platform. And if I just roll back to this one for a second, this is the one that I'm going to focus on today. So we're going to build out the infrastructure for a live event solution, and we're going to run that live event here within the session. So the next one is video production. So we have a few customers, for instance, studios that are using us for building out the workflows that they need. So, when they're on site doing their filming each day, they need to upload their digital dailies back to a central location where they have some producers that are viewing that content. They're using us for that scenario as well. We have some other folks like Brain Sonic that fall into this marketing and advertising scenario. So, just like as I was talking earlier, the currency on the web now is video, and that includes marketing organizations. They have a lot of video, a lot of branded video content that they want to get out to their audiences. So that's yet another scenario where folks are using us to prepare their content. And lastly is enterprise video portals. Now, this is an area that is really just exploding because enterprises are seeing the value in communicating to their employees as well through video, and much more effective rather than sending out a memo to all their employees to send out a quick 5-minute video clip to communicate whatever the CEO may want to communicate that week. So this is a big area, and one of the references that we have here is you may be familiar with Office 365 video, which is built on top of our platform. But we have many other partners that are building enterprise video portal solutions on top of our platform as well. All right, let me just skim through this. Just one more reference. We ran the FIFA World Cup last summer. We had 10 broadcasters on 3 different continents that used Azure Media Services to stream their coverage. And then, as I talked about, NBC Sports is using us for all of the live streaming they're doing, including Sochi. All right, so moving on. So again, the next thing I want to do is I want to run through what are the components that you need to bring together to build out the infrastructure that you're going to need to build a live streaming solution. So let me first move to this diagram. So these are all the components, and let me just briefly describe them here, and then I'm going to dive into them a little bit deeper. So obviously on the far left-hand side, the first thing I'm going to need is some sort of camera. In my case, I'm going to use the webcam on my PC over here, and I'm going to need an encoder of some kind that can take the video from that camera and encode it into a format that I can use to ingest into the cloud. Next, I need a channel. So a channel is basically a compute entity within our platform that we stand up. When you say, I want to run a live event, you're going to create a channel. We create some VMs. There's actually multiple VMs for robustness. But we stand up that live channel and we give you an ingest URL that you'll configure your encoder to push to that ingest URL. And that's how we receive the content from you into our system. On that channel, you'll run a program. And basically what a program does will take whatever you're pushing into us and it'll start to archive that content into an asset. So there's a direct one-to-one pairing between a program and an asset. So we'll take the content that you're pushing in, we write it into that asset for persistent storage for as long as you want to keep it. And then over here on the right-hand side, we have a streaming endpoint. And within the streaming endpoint, that's where we do all the dynamic packaging and encryption that I'll talk about here in a second. And it's also where you can configure CDN services as well. And then lastly, again, we have our Azure Media Player that you can use to set up a viewing experience for that live stream. Now, one more thing I'm going to talk about here. So I talked about the fact that you can build an application that sits above that REST layer to build out this workflow. You can also use our portal. Can't exercise all of our capabilities through our portal, but you can do all the basic stuff. I'm going to use it here today to show you how to set this up. But keep in mind that everything that's happening in the portal as I'm working up here is again going through that REST API. So anything I do through the portal could be automated. You could write code to automate it yourself rather than using the portal. And then lastly, at the end, I'm going to show you a video editor that we've built that again interacts through that REST API to do some trimming. So that's all the basics. Let me dive in now a little bit more on each one of those. So as I mentioned, to start off with, over there on that left-hand side, you're going to need a camera and an encoder. Now, as far as that encoder, our supported ingest protocol, so in other words, you need an encoder here that's going to be able to output over one of these two protocols, either RTMP, by and far, that's what people are using today is RTMP. Pretty much every encoder that you will find out there will have RTMP output. So I would say about 95% of our customers are using RTMP. But we also support smooth streaming or fragmented MP4. You'll have some encoders out there that will do that. So that's an option for you as well. So some of the notable encoders that are available to use that we've tested with. And I'll have a blog entry at the end that I'll point you to that will give you a longer list of these supported encoders, how to configure them, all that kind of good stuff. But some of the big ones here, like Wirecast, is a very popular desktop encoder, fairly inexpensive. I think it's about a $500 license, so it's fairly broadly used. TriCaster will give you a little higher production value. You can do multi-screen, you can do all kinds of transitions, overlays, that kind of stuff. Teradek has a really nice little camera top device. You can mount it right on top of your camera, plug an HDMI into it. And then Elemental, Cisco, and then if you're really hardcore, you can reach out and grab open source FFmpeg, which will also give you RTMP output and use it. So if you wanted to perhaps build your own application that did capture and then output RTMP, you can grab FFmpeg and build that solution yourself. So one more thing that I'll point out, and let me just pop to the next slide, which will make this a little bit clearer. What we have in our platform right at this moment, what I'm going to demonstrate on stage, is I'm using an encoder that's going to output multiple quality levels of the stream. So out of that encoder, as you can see, I'm actually outputting the stream. Here I'm actually going to use 2. On the diagram I have 4. But I'm going to be outputting 2 different quality levels into the channel. And the channel is going to pass that through. So what I would call that is on-premises multi-bit rate encoding. That's what's in our platform today. What we are working on and will hopefully have out at the end of this month in public preview is actually live encoding within the channel itself. So what that allows you to do is just output a single quality level. One of the main benefits there being, I need a dramatically less compute power within that, the encoder here. All I have to do is output one high bit rate, high quality level, what I would call contribution feed, and then I send that to the channel, and the channel will do all the transcoding into the multiple quality levels. So what I'm going to demonstrate today is this. Stay tuned at the end of the month if you want to start using this. And I'll point you to our blog post where you can get additional information when that becomes available. All right. So moving on through the workflow, a little farther to the right. So again, the channel is the ingest component that will take the video coming from your encoder. So what you do within our platform is you create a channel. Within that, we stand up a bunch of compute for you. Again, you don't have to worry about all the dirty plumbing work of creating VMs and hooking them all together, setting up all the security. You just say you want a channel. We take care of the rest. On that channel, you will have you'll have an ingest URL. So you'll take that ingest URL, and I'll show that to you here in just a second. And you'll put that into your encoder. You'll start pushing into the channel. Now, one other thing that the channel provides is, I know that's really hard to see up here, but that is labeled a preview URL. And what that allows you to do is you can actually then, once you're pushing into the channel, you can connect a video player to the preview URL to basically verify that the video is being received properly. So you can push it in, pull it back out, make sure everything's looking good before you get started. So now the next thing, again, is you need a program. So without a program, the channel's receiving all the video, but it's just discarding it. You need to create a program when you actually want to start streaming to your audience and want to start archiving to persist that content. So you'll create an asset, and then you'll also create a program that's attached to that. And again, as it says up here, it will then start archiving that content to storage and make it available for streaming. And let's see, let me move on. Well, let me hop out of here, and I just want to show you within the portal what that looks like. Bear with me, my machine logged off. There we go. Okay, let me see if I can zoom that in a little bit. So here we are within the Azure portal. And the first thing, for those of you that aren't familiar with Azure Media Services, you can find us over here on basically the left tool strip. This is the Media Services icon there. And then I'm in an account called Live Demo West. What I'm then going to do is zoom into channels. And you can see I have one channel created here already that I'm going to use. So I'm going to do a little bit of a Julia Childs here. I'm going to create one. I'll just call it a new one. And you can see here's where I select the ingest protocol that I want. I'm going to select RTMP. Go ahead to tell it to start the new channel now and click OK. So that's all I have to do to create this channel that I just talked about. This process will take about 2 minutes, generally on average, to create a new channel when you need one. Okay. All right. So a couple more things having to do with programs. So again, a program is something you're going to create on a channel when you want to start archiving the live stream that's coming into that channel. So one of the properties that you have on a program will allow you to set the archive window. So think of this as being a data retention policy for the video stream that you're saving into that asset. So in this example that I've got up here on the slide, I'm setting the archive window on that program to 60 minutes. And I'll step through kind of a sequence here. So in the first arrow on the top there, the program's been running for 20 minutes. So in other words, for 20 minutes now, I've had that program running. It's been archiving into an asset. So at that point, I've got 20 minutes of content sitting in my asset. The next one I've been running for 40 minutes. Now I've got 40 minutes of content sitting in that asset. But the third line down here, I've been running for 70 minutes. So now 70 is obviously greater than 60, which was my archive window. So what has happened now is we have started trimming off the old content. So 10 minutes of that content has been auto-deleted. So why may you want to use this? So for instance, you have a very long-running stream and you want to have kind of a linear experience. Say it's going to run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You don't want to archive all that content. Maybe you only want to keep an hour of it so people can DVR back for the last hour and catch up with what they may have missed. Typically, in a live event scenario, you'll want to archive the whole event. So you'll just want to make sure your archive window is bigger than the expected length of your event. All right, so the next thing, I had somebody come up to me right before the session started asking how they want to have a live, long-running stream, but within that stream, they actually have multiple what I would call programs. In their case, it was classes within the day. So they wanted to have one live streaming experience, so anybody who was tuning in could watch that live stream and see whatever's happening right now, but they wanted to archive each one of the classes within the day into their own asset so that they could publish those individually as VOD assets for people, a day later or a week later could come and just watch a particular class. So our programs allow you to do that. So the way that you would enable that is you would have one program. And I guess let me back up for a second and say that you can have a maximum of 3 programs running on your channel at any one point in time. So think of that as I have 3 programs. I'm archiving into 3 different assets, the same exact content being archived into 3 different assets. Now, the way you would take advantage of that capability for that scenario is you would have one program running, say it has again a 1-hour archive window. So anybody tuning into that live stream could DVR back, maybe catch the beginning of the class if they happen to arrive 10 minutes late. So that would run throughout the day for anybody who wants to watch live. But then you can also have a secondary program that spins up at the beginning and end of each program, or each class in their case. So think of the dotted lines as being the boundaries for each class. So another scenario here is in a live broadcast channel where you're providing a linear viewing experience to your audience. You have that program for the linear viewing experience. Then as the news program comes on, you archive that separately. As the soccer match comes on, you archive that separately. The late night program, et cetera, et cetera. So programs are very powerful and allow you to do many different things as far as archiving. All right, so moving along in that chain, the next thing again is the asset and an origin locator. So again, there's a one-to-one mapping between a program and an asset. I actually first create an asset within our system. You create an asset, and then you create a program, and you reference to the asset. You basically tell the program, okay, you're gonna archive into this asset. So the asset is where all of the media files related to that stream are going to go. All the video, all the audio, all the metadata, etc. What an origin locator is by default, when you create an asset, we don't make it available through our origin. There may be scenarios where you just want to stream into the cloud, and you actually don't want to make it available immediately as a stream. Maybe you just want to capture, archive it, and then make it available at some later point in time. So you can create an asset, you can archive your stream, but if you want to make it available to your audience, you need to create an origin locator. And again, that's just an API through our platform where you say create locator. We basically create a GUID that we hand back to you that you'll reference within your URL, and we'll make that asset available through our origin to stream out to your audience. A nice thing about origin locators is it also gives you an entity in which you can do some access control. You can set an expiration date on the locator, so if you only want to make your stream available for the next hour and then have it disappear, you can put an expiration date on your origin locator. You can actually set some policies on your origin locator as well to further control who can access that stream. All right, further along in our architectural journey here, the next thing that you'll need in your infrastructure that you're building out here is what's called a streaming endpoint. So the channel, again, was all about receiving the content into the cloud. The program and the asset were about archiving it. The streaming endpoint is essentially the compute entity that we will stand up for you to allow you to stream it out. So think of it as really like an origin service, if you understand what that is. So it will provide you with the URL that you'll use to reach out and get your content. But it also performs a number of other roles that are very, very powerful. The first one being, this is where all of our dynamic packaging and dynamic encryption and dynamic manifest. So I guess dynamic is kind of the name of the game here. And let me explain why that's important. So within Azure Media Services, a lot of the work that we have done is to enable you to reach as many devices as possible. And if you're familiar with this space at all, you'll know that to reach a very wide breadth of devices and platforms, you need to cover many different protocols. If you want to reach iOS devices, you're going to need HLS. If you want to reach, for instance, Android devices, you may need HLS. You may, in some cases, need to use smooth streaming. If you want to get to an Xbox, you're going to need smooth streaming. So you're going to need many different protocols. And the approach that we've taken to solve that problem for you is to enable what we call dynamic packaging. So rather than having to create a separate workflow for HLS and a separate workflow for smooth and a separate workflow for HDS, etc., you only have one workflow. And then on our origin, you can request that asset in any number of those protocols, and we will dynamically do that at request time. Now, the benefits to doing that for you are number one, reduced complexity. I only have one workflow instead of 3 or 4 or 5 different workflows. Number two is reduced cost. I'm only storing my asset once rather than 3 or 4 or 5 times as well. But also future-proofing. So, Apple's on HLS version, I think 7 is their latest spec. Certainly there will be 9 and 10 and 11 coming out in the future. So if you're statically packaging into HLS version 3 or 4 or whatever it might be today, when you want to be able to support that new protocol version, if you statically package, you're going to have to touch your whole library and, again, repackage it. However, with dynamic packaging, instead we keep it in a mezzanine format. And in the future, when Apple comes out with HLS version 10, we can update the platform with version 10 support, and automatically you'll get it across to your whole platform. So that's a very important consideration as well. So when you combine dynamic packaging with dynamic encryption, it becomes even more powerful. So say, for instance, when you're delivering to Xbox, you want to protect your content with PlayReady because it supports PlayReady protection. But on your mobile devices, you want to have AES encryption. We can enable both of those. So again, that further simplifies the workflow that you need, and again, allows you to stick to one single archive of your stream rather than multiples. I'm going to skip dynamic manifests for now because I'll come back to that later on. So the next component in here is streaming units. Think of streaming units as being basically the building blocks of bandwidth that you need within your origin. So depending on the amount of traffic that you expect on your stream, you can add or remove streaming units. Each streaming unit gives you 200 megabits of capacity essentially on your origin. And you can quickly move up and down. You can scale that as needed throughout your event. All right, and the kind of the last component in our overall delivery chain here is Azure Media Player. So let me explain. We just recently announced Azure Media Player. It's now GA. We announced it at the National Association of Broadcasters about 3 or 4 weeks ago. What Azure Media Player does is it's a completely HTML5, JavaScript, and CSS-based video player framework. And it has all of the smarts built into it to detect what device it's running on and the streaming protocols and encryption formats that are supported on that device. And then based on that, it will do two important things. So it will, number one, it'll choose the right technology for receiving the stream. So let me define that a little bit for you. So for instance, if you are in a Chrome browser which supports MSE, it will stick to HTML5 and use the Dash protocol with dash.js. So no plugins needed, no Flash, no Silverlight, anything like that. But if you're running, say, for instance, within a Firefox browser, which does not yet support MSE, it will detect that and will instantiate a Flash player and then will consume smooth streaming. If you open the video player on iOS, it will detect that. It will know that the video tag in Safari on iOS natively supports HLS. So it will stick to the HTML5 and it will consume the HLS protocol. So it has all the smarts built into it to detect what technology you need, whether that being HTML5, Flash, Silverlight, etc. And then once it's made that decision, it'll have the smarts to know which protocol it needs to request from us. So this has been a really major pain point for developers that have been trying to build video experiences. And so we've gotten a lot of really positive feedback on Azure Media Player. And this is something that we provide to you completely free of charge. And it's simply a set of JavaScript libraries that you can link to within your video player. Yep. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't touch on the last bullet point. Yeah, so the question was about this last bullet point here on the slide about native libraries. Yeah, so we've taken all. So by default's not the right word. The way the media player framework is used most usually is as a set of JavaScript libraries. But if you need to build a native application, say for iOS or for Android, we'll also provide a set of compiled libraries that basically do the same thing. So you can build it directly into your native iOS app or your Android app, etc. Yep. Yep. All right, so now on to the dynamic manifests and rendered subclips that I mentioned earlier on. So two scenarios, and I'll demonstrate this when we get into our workflow later on, that are very common in live streaming scenarios. So number one is typically what you'll do, and I'll actually do this when we go through our timeline, is you'll set up your live stream early to make sure that everything's working properly before the actual event starts. So let's say, for instance, that we want to stream a CEO town hall. So rather than just starting everything as soon as he steps on stage, which would give us basically no room for error if anything went wrong, typically you'll want to start, say, an hour early, get everything spun up, and then once everything's ready, you'll insert a slate that says, thank you for tuning in, CEO will start speaking soon. And you'll display that. That'll be displayed up until the point where he walks on stage. You'll drop that slate, he'll speak, and then at the end, maybe you'll put in a slate that says, thank you for watching, our event is now concluded. So during the live stream, it makes a lot of sense to have that slate at the beginning, but when you publish out that archive as a VOD, you don't want to dump people into an hour of slate at the beginning where they have to seek through and try to figure out where he actually steps on stage. What you want to do is you want to be able to trim off what I would call the top and the tail slate and just publish an archive that just has him speaking. And that's where dynamic manifests comes into play. So what you can do here is basically define a dynamic manifest. You give us an endpoint, give us the time code where he stepped on stage, give us the time code for where he stepped off. And what we do is we will reach into the manifest, again at the time of request. So this is all done dynamically. We'll reach into the manifest and we'll trim off all the fragments before your in point and after your out point. So what the viewer will see is an asset that looks like those slates never existed. They're still there in the archive. So if for whatever reason you needed it, but what you're doing is you're essentially publishing out a snapshot of that just includes the section of the timeline that you want. Another way that you can use dynamic manifests is to filter off renditions. So where you may want to use this is, nowadays with the prevalence of various devices, you may be delivering to an Xbox on a very large screen device, and for that you probably want to have, for instance, a 1080p rendition or quality level so it looks really good on that big screen device. But then for the mobile devices, you probably want to have a very low bitrate, low resolution rendition that you deliver to them. So ideally, you want to build one workflow where you have all of those renditions for all those various devices, but you don't want to deliver them to all the devices. For the person on the Xbox, I don't want to deliver a 192p video stream that they have to ramp up through. It's going to look really ugly. So what Dynamic Manifest also allows you to do is filter out renditions dynamically at request time as well. So I may have a device profile for Xbox that says filter off everything below 1 megabit, because that's just going to look too ugly on that big screen device. And then for the people on the mobile devices, let's trim off 720p and 1080p. That doesn't make any sense for them. So you can define rules within a dynamic manifest for performing that kind of a filter. So the next one, rendered subclips. This is a slightly different scenario. Think of it this way: if we go back to the CEO town hall, maybe he has 1 minute where he talks about something really important to the company strategy. He's got maybe an hour and a half presentation, but there's 1 minute that the one particular department where they talk about something that's really important to them, and they want to publish that out as a short form clip that they can publish out to all the employees within their department. So you would use rendered subclips for that capability. So what we're going to do is, again, you're going to give us an in point and an out point for where he speaks about that 1 minute that you really want. And then what we're going to do is reach in and transcode off of that live archive and create a whole new asset. And the really nice thing about that is that it can have its own unique security properties. It can also have its own unique lifetime. So if 7 days after the town hall, they're going to delete that archive of the CEO speaking, that 1 minute rendered subclip can live on as long as you want independently. Yep, really quick question.
Do you guys do anything with link integration right now?
So the question is, do we do anything with link integration right now? No, not right now. Not right now.
The biggest problems that we're facing is that we have a lot of demand for self-service after a link meeting.
Uh-huh.
Report, and they want the option to automate that into a VOD portal.
Okay.
I don't know if that was something that you guys had on your roadmap.
Why don't you come up and talk to me afterwards? Yeah, we can talk. Okay, so just rolling back to this. So again, that concludes, basically my walkthrough of all the various components that go into making up a live solution. Now I actually want to walk through running an event, so stitching together all these components. So for this, I first want to talk about kind of the prototypical timeline that you would use in running a live event. So I talked a little bit earlier about wanting to start early, make sure everything's set up properly, inserting a slate, dropping the slate, etc. So this is all part of that timeline. So if I just walk through this, sometime prior, probably a day or two before the event starts or the event needs to run, there's a couple of setup events you probably want to run ahead of time. Number one, create that channel. So I showed you in the portal how I created the channel. You can create a channel that will give you your ingest URL. It will give your preview URL. You can take those URLs, put them into whatever kind of CMS system you may have, etc. Get all that set up, and then you can stop it. Once it's stopped, it's not costing you any money. It's just sitting there. You're essentially dehydrating it, and then right before the event, you can rehydrate it, and it's still using the same URLs, etc. So you can kind of pre-configure everything, turn it off, and it's not costing you anything. The next thing you probably want to do is create your streaming endpoint. So again, streaming endpoint is essentially your origin. You need to create one, essentially the same thing as the channel. You can create one. It'll give you your base URL that you'll use. You put that into your CMS, etc. If you need to use CDN services, you can turn on CDN, get all that configured, and then turn it off. It's not costing you anything to just have it sit there. Okay, so now we're getting to the day of the event. So again, about 60 minutes before that event starts, now I want to start to spin up all my infrastructure. So there I want to start my channel, get that running again, get it rehydrated, get it ready to start receiving my stream. Next, once that's running, I'll start my encoder, start pushing into the channel. Then next, using that preview URL, I'll check the stream, make sure that it's being received properly into the channel, make sure we're all ready to go. At that point, I can insert my pre-event slate. So again, at this point, I'm not archiving anything. I'm just checking that everything's being received into Azure properly. Nothing's being archived, which is why I want to insert the slate here before I move on to the next step. So perhaps at T-minus 30 minutes to the start of, to him stepping on stage, that's where I would start the program. So the reason why you want to start the program here is you may want to give your audience a chance to connect. They may arrive 10 minutes early, 15 minutes early. You want to give them the chance to connect to it and just sit there and wait for him to step on stage, rather than starting, again, right when he steps on stage and then everybody's trying to scramble to get connected to the stream and not miss anything. So once I've got that program created, then I can go ahead and publish that link. So at that point, I've got my asset. I've created my asset locator. It's streams available to pull out of the streaming endpoint. It's ready to stream. I can assemble my URL through our APIs, take that URL and put it into my CMS, basically publish it out to all my viewers through my video player. So again, I'm talking about this in somewhat of a manual fashion, but everything that I'm talking about here can be done through our API, so it can be automated through the application that you build. Then when he steps on stage at time t, it's where I drop the slate, so we can start seeing him at the end of the session. Then I would again insert some sort of slate. It says thank you for watching, and then probably leave that running for 15 minutes or so just to give people a graceful exit out. And then after that, I can go ahead and stop my program, stop the encoder, stop the channel, basically tear down the whole infrastructure that I just built. And then lastly, again, we talked about the ability, wanting to trim off the slate from the beginning and end, so we can do that, create the dynamic manifest, and then republish the asset. So let me go ahead and step through that. For that, I'm going to step back over here to my laptop. Okay, so the first thing I want to do, again, is here's the channel that I created earlier that you saw me create. It's now ready to go, but rather than using that, I'm just going to stick with this existing channel that I have already created. It's already running. I'll go over here into streaming endpoints. So I talked about needing to create one of those. So here's the streaming endpoint that I'm going to use. Here is the host name for that streaming endpoint. So that's essentially going to be the base URL when I want to construct the URL to my streaming asset. So I've got my streaming endpoint. Let me do this. Is that readable, or do you need that bigger? Is that big enough? Okay, good. All right, so here's again the timeline I'm going to walk through. So number one, again, I want to create my channel. I'm going to skip past this. I've already got the channel. I want to start my channel. I've already got the channel started. I want to start my encoder, so let's do that next. So I'm going to go over here to Wirecast in this case. Again, a very inexpensive and easy to use desktop encoder that I'm going to use here. In this case, I'm going to use my webcam on my laptop. And let me just show you something very quickly within Edgecast. I know this is probably going to be somewhat hard to read. Unfortunately, I don't have a way to zoom in on it. But I've got two output quality levels configured here within Edgecast. I've got a 400K level, and I've got a 900K level. And this address here that you see here, I know you can't read it, but take my word for it. If I go over to channels, what I've done is I've taken the ingest URL from this channel that I want to use. Ooh, did I select the wrong one? Yeah, I did select the wrong one. Let me select the right one. So what I've done is I've taken this ingest URL from that channel and I've stuck it into the address within Wirecast. So that's what's configured here. Let's go back. And again, I've got two different quality levels that I'm outputting in. All right, so I'm all ready to go from an encoder perspective. Now all I need to do here within Wirecast is hit the stream button. It's going to flash for a minute while it's connecting to us, and now it's solid, which means that Wirecast thinks it's connected to us and it's pushing the stream in. Okay, so now I can verify that. Again, if I go back here, the next step is to check that the stream is available through the preview URL. So I think I'm pushing in, but I want to verify that Azure is actually receiving my stream. So I can go back here into the portal, and this little play button down here has play preview URL. And there we go. I must have stepped away for a second. Oh, I know. What I forgot to do is I forgot to do that. So it was streaming black there for a minute. That's why you're not seeing anything. So I'll appear here in a couple of seconds. So anyway, what this means is that I basically have verification that that stream is being received into the cloud. There I am. So now what I can do, I'm basically in a steady state now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and insert my pre-event slate. Again, all the content that's being received into the cloud, none of it's being archived yet. It's just being abandoned. So I'm going to insert that slate. It says, thank you for tuning in. Your session will start shortly. Okay, now I can wait. Probably wait till 30 minutes before the session starts or something like that. Now I can move on to T minus 30 minutes. So now I want to start the program. So I can go back here into the portal. And I'm going to select Add New Program. And I'll just give it the name Ignite. Now here's where I can set my archive window. So I remember the archive window is basically the retention policy for this asset. So what this means is if I keep it at 4 minutes, if my event runs any longer than four hours, the old content will start getting deleted off of it. So in my case, I want to retain everything. I don't want anything to be deleted. So I can set it up to the max of 25 hours. Now the other option that I have here is whether I want to encrypt the stream. So do I want to dynamically apply any encryption, whether that be play-ready encryption or AES encryption to the stream? And then for our purposes here, I'm just going to keep it unencrypted. And the last option here within the portal is to select whether I want to publish the stream. So in other words, do I want to create that origin locator that makes it available for streaming out of the streaming endpoint? If I unselect this, we'll archive, but nobody will be able to pull it out as a stream. It'll just be archived, and that's all it'll be. So I'm going to leave that checked, which will cause the portal to go ahead and create an origin locator and make that stream available. So we'll do that. It'll just take maybe about 30 seconds for it to create. So the question was, why wouldn't you just always turn on encryption? It doesn't impact quality. You may have some devices that don't support encryption. With play-ready specifically, there's a limited number of devices that can support play-ready. Most devices will support AES encryption, but you may have some that don't. So it really just... You need to look at the devices that you want to be able to reach, as well as obviously your security needs. Okay, let's just hold. I just want to make sure. Let's pause on the questions, and I'll have some time at the end. All right, so there's my program. I'm going to go ahead and start it. All right, so it's running. So now what I'm going to do, the next step was to publish a link to the stream. So again, you would probably have a CMS that's automating all these steps. So it probably would automatically publish for you. Again, I'm doing everything very manually. So I'm going to take the manual step of going in here and grabbing the publish URL for that stream. And I'm going to publish it in a very manual way. Here, I'll show you exactly what I'm going to do. I've got a video player here that I'm going to make available to you guys, built using the Azure Media Player framework that I talked about earlier on. I'm just going to paste in that URL. There's my stream. And I'm going to make it available to you guys so you can view it on your device as well. Got a little QR code. All right, so if you've got a device, got two options here for you. You can either type in the shortened URL here or scan that QR code, one or the other. Hopefully we've got somebody with an iOS device, somebody with an Android device, maybe somebody with a Windows phone. All right, there's one. And is that an iOS device? Anybody got an Android? Android, okay. So again, what's happening there on your devices is the Azure Media Player is, again, detecting the capability of the browser that you're running in. And then, since most of those devices don't support, a plugin of some kind, it's probably using HTML5 and either using HLS or MPEG-Dash to play back the stream. So anyway, there is the publishing of my stream. All right, so we're up and running now. So now we're basically waiting for the CEO to step on stage. We've got our live stream published out. We've got our slate in there. So now he's going to walk on stage. So I want to drop the slate. So if I go back in here to Wirecast, I'm basically going to go back to my pretty face and drop that slate. Okay, now we're live. The CEO's talking about all of his vision for the future. I'm going to go ahead and let that run for as long as he's on stage. And then when he's done, the next thing that we're going to want to do is insert that post-event slate. So I'm just going to let this run for just a second, just so I have something that I can trim out at the end. Guess that's long enough. I'll now tee up that post-event slate, and I'll drop it in. So now, hopefully, we have about a 30-second latency, and most of that is actually on the client side. Due to the adaptive protocols that we're using, they build a bit of a buffer on the client. So we have about a 30-second latency. So about 30 seconds after I drop that in, you should see that post-event slate showing up on your devices. So now I've got that in there. Everybody's dropping off the stream. So now, if we wait, say about 15 minutes or so, let everybody gracefully exit. The next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and stop that program. So stop archiving the stream into the asset. Now, one of the capabilities, really nice, powerful capabilities that we have within our platform is that we have essentially a seamless live to VOD transition. There really is no hard transition. So on your device, if you DVR back, and then as I stop this program and basically transition this stream from live to VOD, you'll see that you can continue playing throughout the entire event. You don't get dumped out of the stream and then have to come back later and connect to the VOD. The stream stays continuously available throughout this transition. So I'm going to go back into the portal. I'm going to go to this program that I started earlier and just hit the stop button. Take again about 30 seconds to stop it. All right, stopped. Anybody watch throughout that transition? Anybody have it? No? All right, trust me. It works. All right, and then as it says, the next thing I'm going to do is go in here and stop my encoder. Just hit that stream button within Wirecast again. All right, now that's all shut down. I can stop my channel. Essentially all I have to do here is, again, within the portal, just a stop button here to stop the channel. But the thing that I want to jump to is trimming that archive using the dynamic manifest capabilities that we talked about earlier. So if I go in here, one of the things that we're going to make available as part of our dynamic manifest capabilities is a video editor to go along with that. This is all an HTML5 based video editor. So no plugins involved here. It's all using, again, the power of the Azure Media Player to detect whatever protocols it needs for each device. And here is that archive that I just created up here on stage. Now, what this allows me to do is then seek through and find, wherever the CEOs started talking. I'm not going to spend time finding that. Rather, I'll just do a really quick set in. Ooh, try reloading. Eek. This is not yet released, so bear with me for a second. Just close and reload. All right, one more try. Come on. There it goes. All right, so I'm going to set a set in. I'll just set another set out. Something like that. I'll just do it somewhat randomly. Come on, do the set out. Well, it seems like the demo gods are getting me here. But essentially what I can do here is, again, this is just a tool that we'll be providing that will allow you to find the time code for the in and out point that you want to set for the dynamic manifest. And then you can go ahead and publish that. It will go ahead and create the dynamic manifest for you and then hand you back to the URL that you can then republish back out to your audience. Not sure what's going on here, but we'll get that fixed before we release it. All right, so then that concludes our workflow. So just a couple more things that I want to go through. If I switch back over to our slides. So a couple of additional items. We talked briefly about content protection. Within that dialog box, when I created the program, I could have selected AES encryption or play-ready encryption. Obviously, you could do that through the API as well. We also have support within the Azure Media Player. It'll detect if the stream is play-ready protected or AES encrypted. And then it has all the integration with our key delivery services as well. So for instance, if it sees that it's play-ready protected, it will try to instantiate a Silverlight control in order to play back the stream. And then it will also get the license URL from the manifest and go ahead and auto request the license for you. It'll do the same thing with AES keys as well. The next thing we talked about rendered subclips. I didn't try to perform one up here, but again, the rendered subclip capability allows you to, somewhat like the dynamic manifest where you're trimming, but in this case you extract out some of the content, make a new asset. And then lastly, as I talked about way back at the beginning, up here on stage, I had Wirecast outputting multiple quality levels that we were essentially passing through to the audience. And later this month, we'll be releasing a public preview of live encoding. So again, that allows you to push in a single quality level, and then we'll do all the transcoding to provide you with the multiple renditions. All right, and I'll conclude with this. I know you can't read it, but please just go to the Yammer site. You can download the deck. I have a number of different things in here. I have a link to our homepage where you can get all kinds of information about documentation, links to our blogs. I have all kinds of blog entries about all the details about configuring RTMP encoders to work with us, kind of all the details about content protection, all that kind of stuff. There's a blog entry that I've got on here that you can reference back to get more information about that. So anyway, grab the deck, kind of a wealth of information here. And then lastly, feel free to reach out to me. Here's my email address. More than happy to help you with any additional questions that you have about this. I'm passionate about our service and want to make sure you guys can get up and running. So with that, we've got about 5 minutes, so I can take a few questions. I guess the first one there.
The video trimmer integration, integrated video trimmer, do you have a roadmap for like additional video editing capabilities there?
So the question was about the video editor that I showed up here, and do we have a roadmap for additional capabilities? What I would say is, with our rendered subclipping right now, we can only do single cuts. So you give us an in point and an out point. I would say the next step in our evolution is to be able to string together multiple cuts into a playlist. So as we add that capability, yes, I would say we would extend the capabilities of the video editor to allow you to do that stitching together. Yeah. It's always going to be a very rough cut editor, whether probably never going to have transitions or overlays or anything like that. Yep. Next one. Go ahead.
Because you can have different programs and the different assets, is there a way, if you're on a campus, to have a stream that's multicast and then for people that are off campus be unicast?
So there's kind of two aspects to that. So first off, we can't multicast from the cloud. We can only support unicast from the cloud. Yeah. So you would have to be able to ingest the unicast and translate it into multicast. But certainly you could. You could have a program that you're going to ingest and turn into multicast on campus, and then a separate one that you just set up our CDN services and distribute unicast for everybody external to the campus. So yeah, you could certainly.
Is there a way to sort of natively do that, though, like maybe through the SharePoint portal? Or
is there any way to natively do that through the SharePoint portal? Well,
SharePoint on-prem, I guess it would be at that point.
I mean, there's no way to do the multicast translation, if that's what you mean. Maybe if you want to reach out to me, sounds like you have a more in-depth question. Yeah, go ahead.
Is there a way to do security around using Azure AD groups? So let's say you wanted to have a live broadcast that only a manager's group could access, for instance.
So what we do is with our encryption and our key delivery services is we support web tokens. So essentially, you would want to build your own authentication system that would issue a token to the client. When you set up your stream with encryption, you can set up a delivery policy on it. And you can say, I want it encrypted and have it be open, meaning that we'll issue the AES key to anybody who requests it, or you can lock it down to authenticated tokens. So basically, the way that would work is you would build your own authentication system. The client would reach out to you to get, say, a JWT token that you would then hand to us. We would crack it open and verify it. So we're not directly integrating with your AD service. You generate a token from your AD service that we crack open and verify.
Is there a plan to integrate with AD at any point down the road?
The question was, is there a plan to directly integrate with AD? Not right now. No. Yep. Next one.
Is there a way to remove the watermark and the controls from the Azure player?
Is there? Yes, there is. There's actually a property on the JavaScript library where you can just say, I don't want it. Yeah.
And also, can you start and stop the video through JavaScript?
Yeah. Yep. One more question.
With the Azure Stack being released for private clouds, any plan for this as well?
I'm sorry, say that one
With
more
the
time.
Azure Stack being released for private clouds, any plans for the media services stack to be released?
Yeah, I don't have anything that I can comment on right now, but yes, I think so.
It'd be good.
Yep. All right, thank you everyone for coming. Yep.